When we talk about Romance languages,
Mhm.
um, most people immediately think of like Spanish, Italian, French,
Mm.
the usual suspects. But you've asked for a deep dive into one that's often overlooked,
Yeah.
Romanian.
Yeah.
So we're doing that today.
It is often dubbed the hidden Romance language,
Yeah.
tucked away in Eastern Europe.
And what I think is so fascinating about it is that it's spoken by millions.
Right?
Like, this isn't a small
Doll.
language.
Yeah.
It has a rich history. It's intertwined with empires and linguistic crossroads. So for this deep dive, we're going way beyond Dracula and Transylvania, right?
Exactly.
You've provided some really interesting excerpts on everything from linguistic origins to the whole Moldovan versus Romanian debate.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of how intertwined language and politics can be,
Yes.
even when linguists largely agree.
Yeah, it's like we're unpacking this mystery with layers of history, culture, identity all wrapped up. So to set the stage, let's go back to the very beginning, the roots of the Romanian language. Where does it fit in on this like family tree of Romance languages?
Well, like its more famous siblings, Romanian traces its ancestry back to Vulgar Latin,
Okay.
the everyday language spoken by Roman soldiers, merchants, colonists,
Right.
But unlike in the West, where Vulgar Latin evolved into Spanish, French, and Italian in southeastern Europe, things took a different turn.
Because of its geographic location?
Precisely, imagine a map of Europe with a line running across it. Historians call this line the Gierichic line.
Okay.
And it roughly marked the northernmost reach of the Eastern Roman Empire's influence.
Wow.
Above it, Latin held sway, but below it, Greek dominated.
Uh-huh.
Romanian's ancestor developed in this unique space just north of that dividing line.
So it was like a linguistic melting pot
Exactly.
from the get-go.
From the get-go, and by the 10th century, this early form of Romanian, known as Common Romanian, had split into different dialects, the most prominent being Daco-Romanian, which you find in modern-day Romania and Moldova.
Okay, so that's the branch we're focusing on here. But
Yeah.
you mentioned other siblings in this family.
Right, there's Aromanian and Magleno-Romanian spoken further south, below the Gierichic line, and then there's Istro-Romanian, which is spoken by a very small community in Croatia.
Wow.
Each has its own quirks and characteristics developed over time in their respective regions.
It's incredible how geography shapes the destiny of a language, isn't it?
It really is fascinating.
But let's zoom back in on Daco-Romanian, the ancestor of the language spoken in Romania and Moldova today. It's not like it just stayed frozen in time after this initial split, right?
Absolutely not. From the 10th century onwards, Romanian came into contact with the Slavic languages.
Okay.
I think of it like adding a whole new spice rack to a family recipe.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. What kind of flavors did Slavic languages bring to Romanian?
Well, for one, a significant chunk of Romanian vocabulary, some estimate around 10 to 15%, comes from Slavic languages, particularly Old Church Slavonic.
Church Slavonic. So, as in related to religion, was Romanian spoken in a religious context during this time?
Absolutely. From the 14th to the 18th centuries, Old Church Slavonic was incredibly influential in the region, serving as the language of administration and religious ceremonies.
Interesting.
So Romanian absorbed terms related to faith authority, ritual. Think words like sfant for saint or abutesa for to baptize.
Wow. So these weren't just everyday words. These were tied to concepts of power and spiritual belief.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Did this borrowing go both ways, or was it mainly Romanian adopting Slavic words?
That's a question that keeps linguists debating.
Oh, really?
While Romanian certainly borrowed heavily from Slavic languages, there's evidence suggesting a more back-and-forth exchange, possibly even influencing how certain Romanian sounds developed. It's like a linguistic puzzle.
I love that there's still these mysteries to uncover.
Oh, absolutely.
But while we're on the topic of outside influence, this was also around the time that we had the Ottoman Empire, which was a major power in the region, right? Did Turkish leave its mark on Romanian as well?
It did, though, to a lesser extent than Slavic languages. We see it in words like papuchi for slippers or siorba for a type of soup everyday items and experiences.
So even under the shadow of empires, Romanian was still absorbing, adapting, creating its own unique blend of influences. But did Romanians during this period see their language as something distinct, something Romanian, even without a unified nation state?
That's the amazing part. Even before the formation of Romania as we know it, people living in these regions had a name for themselves, Rumun or Roman.
And for their language.
You guessed it, Rumana or Romanesca. We see these terms in documents dating back to the 16th century, showcasing a sense of linguistic identity,
Wow.
even amidst this tapestry of empires and languages.
That's really remarkable. It speaks to the enduring power of language as a marker of identity. But what about the written word? During this time, were there Romanian texts, and if so, what did they look like?
There were, but there's a fascinating twist. Up until the late 18th century, Romanian was primarily written using the Cyrillic alphabet,
Right.
the same one used for Russian today.
That seems so counterintuitive considering its Latin roots. Why Cyrillic?
It's a reflection of the cultural and religious landscape at the time. Remember, Eastern Orthodoxy was a dominant force in the region, and Cyrillic script was deeply entrenched in those traditions.
Huh. So how did Romanian eventually make the switch to the Latin alphabet? It seems like a pretty significant shift.
Picture this, it's the 18th century. The Enlightenment is sweeping across Europe, igniting a passion for classical learning and a return to roots.
Okay.
Romanian intellectuals were captivated by this movement, rediscovering the Latin at the heart of their own language.
A linguistic homecoming of sorts.
Exactly. A group of scholars known as the Transylvanian School became champions of this linguistic revival they saw, adopting the Latin alphabet as a way to legitimize Romanian.
Interesting.
To highlight its connection to a prestigious linguistic lineage, think of languages like French and Italian, which were highly regarded at the time.
So it wasn't just about language, it was about elevating Romanian status.
Precisely one of the pivotal figures in this movement was Samuel Micu Klein. He co-authored the first Romanian grammar book published in Vienna in 1780.
1780, that seems surprisingly late considering Romanian had been spoken for centuries.
Remember, Romanian had long been considered a language of the common people. Formal scholarship and official documents favored languages like Latin, Greek, even Turkish. This grammar book was a way to challenge those perceptions.
So it was a bold statement, a declaration of Romanian's rightful place among languages. Did they write the grammar book in Romanian?
Interestingly, they chose to write it in Latin, a nod to both their scholarly credentials and a strategic move to make their work more palatable to those in power.
Wow, fascinating. Did Romanian immediately switch over to the Latin alphabet after that?
Not quite. It was a more gradual evolution for a while. You see these fascinating hybrid alphabets popping up, mixtures of Latin and Cyrillic letters, almost like a visual representation of the linguistic transition taking place.
A blend of the familiar and the new. It makes you wonder what it must have been like to read those texts, navigating that visual blend of alphabets.
It's a fascinating window into a time of significant change. It wasn't until the mid-19th century, fueled by both linguistic and political shifts, that the Latin alphabet became official in the regions that would form Romania.
I can only imagine that wasn't a decision without controversy. Changing a writing system is a powerful statement.
Absolutely. It touches on identity, access to knowledge, even power dynamics. But what's striking is that even as Romanian embraced the Latin alphabet and began incorporating words from French and Italian languages considered sophisticated and refined, it never lost its own distinct character.
It's like Romanian was adding elements to its wardrobe, but never losing sight of its own unique style.
That's a great analogy. And as Romanian literature blossomed in the 19th and 20th centuries, you see this incredible fusion of influences. Take Mihai Eminescu, considered Romania's national poet. His work beautifully blends elements of its Latin heritage with those Slavic influences we discussed earlier.
It's a testament to Romanian's ability to adapt and evolve while staying true to its roots. Speaking of which, let's talk about Moldova. You mentioned at the beginning that the whole Moldovan versus Romanian debate perfectly illustrates how complex the relationship between language and politics can be.
Absolutely. It's a subject where we need to tread carefully and stick to the linguistic facts and various perspectives without advocating for any particular viewpoint.
Of course, our goal is to present a balanced and nuanced picture for our listener. So let's start with the basics. What's the linguistic consensus on Moldovan versus Romanian?
From a purely linguistic perspective, scholars overwhelmingly agree that Romanian and Moldovan are essentially the same language.
Essentially, does that mean there are some differences, even if they are minor?
Think of it like American English and British English both are undoubtedly English,
Right.
but with regional accents, slang terms, and even a few spelling variations.
Right, but I can still understand someone from London, even if they chuckle at my pronunciation.
Exactly. The differences between Romanian and Moldovan are primarily on that level: pronunciation, regional vocabulary. Maybe a preference for certain grammatical constructions. Someone from Bucharest and someone from Chisinau can understand each other without too much difficulty.
But when we step outside the realm of linguistics and into the world of politics, things get a bit more complicated.
Definitely. Moldova has a complex history often caught between Romania and Russia, and language has frequently been used as a tool to assert a national identity or align with a specific political ideology.
So sometimes calling it Moldovan is less about linguistic differences and more about emphasizing a distinct Moldovan identity separate from Romania.
Exactly. It's a way of asserting we have our own unique story, culture, and way of speaking, even if our language is very close to Romania.
Language as a way to draw boundaries, to define who we are. So how did this play out in Moldova's official stance on the language?
For years, the official language was called Moldovan, and they even used the Cyrillic alphabet for a period even after Romania had switched to Latin.
Hold on, Cyrillic, but we just talked about how Romanian went through this whole process of adopting that Latin alphabet. It seems like Moldova was going in the opposite direction.
It highlights how political decisions can sometimes diverge from purely linguistic realities. During the Soviet period, promoting Moldovan as distinct and using Cyrillic served to distance Moldova from Romania and align it more closely with that Soviet sphere of influence.
So even the alphabet became a symbol of political allegiance. What's the situation in Moldova today? Do people say Romanian or Moldovan?
It's actually a fascinating mix. Even now, the 2014 census data showed a near even split between those who identify as speaking Moldovan and those who say they speak Romanian.
Wow, right down the middle. It seems like the debate is still very much alive.
In a way, it is, even though the Constitutional Court of Moldova ruled in 2013 that the official language of the country, according to their Declaration of Independence, is Romanian language, often transcends official pronouncements. It runs deeper, reflecting how people see themselves and choose to express their identity.
It reminds us that language is dynamic, constantly evolving, and deeply intertwined with social and political realities. We've covered a lot of ground. The historical tapestry, linguistic, influences the alphabet debate, and even delved into the complexities of the Moldovan versus Romanian question.
And through it all, I think what emerges is a portrait of a language that's both resilient and adaptable, shaped by its past, but always open to new influences.
Speaking of which, do you have any fun facts about Romanian, Baris?
Mm-hmm.
Our listener always appreciates those aha moments.
How about this? Did you know that Romanian lays claim to the longest word in the world?
No way, I have to know this. What is this linguistic behemoth?
Prepare yourself. The word is pneuma ultramicroscopic silica volcaniconiosa.
How many letters are we talking about?
A grand total of 44 letters.
There is no way I'm even going to attempt to pronounce that. What does it even mean?
It's a lung disease, basically. A really, really long word for a very specific medical condition caused by inhaling fine silica dust like volcanic ash.
Well, if you're going to have a 44-letter word, it might as well be for something memorable. Hopefully our listener never encounters that word in a medical context. Speaking of our listener, this feels like a good place to transition to the final part of our Romanian deep dive. It's funny how one word can send us down this whole rabbit hole.
I know, right?
But that's the beauty of language, right?
Absolutely.
There's always something new to uncover, but we've mainly focused on Romanian's historical journey so far. But as you alluded to earlier, it's not like the language stopped changing once the alphabet got sorted out. What about more recent influences, especially in our globalized world?
That's an important point. Just like English has infiltrated countless languages, Romanian hasn't been immune to the influx of English words, particularly in fields like technology, business, and pop culture.
Yeah, it makes sense, right? As new concepts emerge, you need new words to describe them.
Exactly.
It's like Romanian's adding those ingredients to its recipe in real time. Do you have the examples off the top of your head?
Yeah, think of words like computer, internet, smartphone. These have been directly adopted into Romanian. But what's interesting is how Romanian adapts them to its own grammatical rules. So computer becomes calculator, seamlessly fitting into the language's structure.
So it's welcoming these new words, but it's not afraid to give them that Romanian twist.
Precisely. And that's what makes studying a living language so endlessly fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a reflection of how we interact with the world around us, how cultures intersect, and how language constantly evolves to keep pace with those changes.
It reminds us that language is never static. It's a dynamic force shaped by the ebb and flow of history, culture, even technology.
Exactly. And Romanian, with its unique journey through those currents, offers a captivating case study in linguistic adaptation and resilience.
It makes you wonder what new ingredients Romanian will add to its linguistic tapestry in the years to come. Any final thoughts for our listener as we kind of wrap up our deep dive?
I'd encourage our listener to think about their own encounters with language in their daily lives. Do you notice English words creeping into your native tongue? Or perhaps words from other languages you've been exposed to? Pay attention to those linguistic borrowings. They tell a fascinating story about how languages intersect and evolve.
That's a fantastic point. It's a reminder that we're all a part of this ever-changing linguistic landscape. Well, on that note, we'll bring this deep dive into the world of Romanian to a close. We hope you enjoyed this exploration of its hidden depths.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of language. You never know what you might discover.